Scuba diving in cold water is kind of a balancing act between having so thick gloves that you can't actually feel what you're doing and not wearing enough exposure protection and your hands are numb so you still can't feel what you're doing. But what's the best way to actually use thicker gloves without fumbling whatever you're playing with? Hi all of you awesome scuba divers out there, welcome to the Scuba Diving Magazine channel and welcome to Askmark, our scuba diving Q&A, where I, Mark, a former dive instructor, do my best to answer your scuba diving questions. If you do have any diving questions, pop them down in the comment section underneath this video. Pop this hashtag in the comment and I'll get to it as soon as I can. And the community does an awesome job of interacting as well and answering people's questions. So thank you everyone for doing that for me. But yeah, today I'm answering a question from Stephen Wood about how to better learn how to use 5mm gloves. So Stephen Wood 1468 says techniques to learn to better use 5mm gloves and dry gloves. Right, so cold water diving whilst wearing gloves, the first thing is to accept the fact that you're not going to be doing any like fine calligraphy work whilst you're underwater. You're going to just get the job done the best that you can. And the best advice that I usually give is try not to use your fingertips as much as you would barehanded. Your fingertips are just going to allow for fumbling. Whereas if you're using like the rest of your fingers and your thumbs, then you're more likely to actually get something done. But also make your life as easy as possible ahead of time. So trying to make things as big as possible to match your chunky gloves. Now, I don't use 5mm gloves as much as I used to. I now wear dry gloves. We'll talk about them in a second. But whenever you're diving in colder waters, you'll notice that bolt snaps especially come in different sizes. This is specifically, well, as far as I understand it, specifically for cold water use, because a small little double ender, as you can see, I don't have very many because this one's brass and you all know how I feel about brass bolt snaps, but all of that basically gets used up in 2 fingers of my glove. When it's just barehanded, I'd be able to manipulate that a bit easier, so in warmer climates. But yeah, in cold water, yeah, it's not as easy to use, but I'm trying not to use like my fingertips as much as possible. I'm trying to get a little bit further down, so I'm less likely to like struggle to get that very tip on the tip of my finger. I'm kind of using the side of my fingers. But throw away the small stuff and get something a little bit larger, which is more designed for cold water gloves, so it is just easier to manipulate. Also, with something like a finger spool, realistically you wouldn't really use a finger spool, you'd use an actual reel, because yeah, fingers is not that easy to use finger spools, but there are a few things that you can do to make it a little bit easier to use. The first is using a larger bolt snap, but also you'll see I've made this little tag here. So, well, I haven't made it, Apex made it, I just put it in a slightly different position. So it's just where the leader just goes into that side, so that now that I'm wearing gloves, without that, I'd be trying to fiddle with that, trying to get that out for days. But with that, it is much easier just to pull that free. So just little things like that, especially with like rope lines and things, just makes your life a little easier, or trying to make your life a little easier by adding those kind of things. Just run through the entire dive and just go, hey, what am I actually going to need to manipulate whilst I'm underwater? Can I make that any easier if I don't have dexterity? The other thing is just rope work and practice. So during the HSC course, they give you sections of rope to basically practice. So the more that you do it, the more like muscle memory comes of it. And yeah, you just kind of do it innately. Start off with bare hands and then move on to like gloves. But it's very much a matter of, instead of working right at the tip, give yourself a few more inches of rope to work with, and then it just makes it a little bit easier. Just make things bigger than you're used to without gloves on, basically. And it really just makes things, yeah, bigger to work with, so that when you are doing work, you've got more to play with. Sure, you're not going to be as efficient, you've got this tail on the end, but it gives you something to actually grab hold of when you're wearing gloves. So yeah, and I'm usually like in this crook of my thumb and my finger, so that instead of using fingertips, you're using what is actually less likely to slip. Otherwise, yeah, it really just comes down to practice, and you don't really have to use things how you normally would. Two hands definitely make life a lot easier. But yeah, fingertips, try to avoid using your very fingertips. Then it really comes down to dry gloves. Dry gloves were the biggest like upgrade to my dexterity game, as it were. This is why I don't tend to use wet gloves as much. I always bring them with me, because even if you puncture a 5mm glove, it's still going to keep your hand warm. When I was diving in the Arctic, I had dry gloves, and one of the gloves, I think it was my right one, failed, and yeah, a couple of my fingers were numb towards the end of the dive, but subsequent dives, I was wearing wet gloves and they were perfectly fine. It's just, yeah, dexterity wise is a little tough. So dry gloves are a lot thinner. You typically have an under glove. These come in many different variations nowadays, and they're just a relatively thin woolly glove. Just like your undersuit, it's there to maintain that like layer of insulating air. It's the actual glove itself that's keeping you dry. They'll have a ring that corresponds to a ring that's on your actual dry suit sleeve, and then you put it on. The glove itself, these also come in different variations. This one is just like a beefed up washing up glove, basically. It's, I want to say 1.6mm thick, so pretty thin compared to a 5mm, and yeah, they just click in and you have much more dexterity. So using things is much easier. A lot of it just comes down to practice, really. The more time that you spend with it, the easier it gets. You do get tougher like dry gloves, which are made for if you're doing like work and stuff. They're less likely to rip and tear, but for general diving, yeah, these are usually more than enough. But yeah, I tend to stick to dry gloves nowadays. They're just that much, I find them warmer, even with like a thin underglove, and you can change the underglove as well. You can get thicker, warmer ones, all sorts of like alpaca fur and all kind of clever things. And yeah, I just find I have better dexterity with them. But a lot of it comes down to, yeah, try to avoid using your very fingertips as you would like naturally. You're kind of using like further down the actual hand, and yeah, it's just a little different, and a lot of it just comes down to practice. So yeah, if you do, just find a section of rope and just work your way through a bunch of rope guides, knot tying guides, with your new gloves, and before long you'll find it's just that much easier. Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes down to like moderating your expectations. You've got like a centimetre, if you're wearing 5mm gloves, you've got a centimetre of neoprene between your fingertips. Your dexterity is going to be fairly limited. Something else that I did actually that I forgot to mention is, not with these gloves, but some of my old gloves, I actually cut the very fingertips off. So you still have like dexterity. In really cold waters, I actually made a set of 3mm gloves to go under my 5mm gloves, so that the fingertip was still covered a little bit, but only with like 3mm neoprene instead of 5mm. Your fingertips, I think they did get cold on some dives in really chilly waters, but if dexterity is an issue, then yeah, you can certainly get that. You see a lot of like technical divers do it, and some manufacturers actually make dedicated like tech diving gloves with, it's usually the thumb, the first, and sometimes the middle finger all have their fingertips missing, just so that you still have dexterity, but you're still kind of covered for most of the glove. But otherwise, yeah, it is just down to practice. Rope work, and making your life as easy as possible. I saw this, Struth, I can't remember where I actually saw it, but they moved this little tag. This is usually at the very tip of the leader, and it's so that you can thread it through that much easier. However, it's not that tricky. And what I actually did was I tied a little knot on the end of that. You can use heat shrink tape to make 2 of these. And I think I've done that on one of my other spools. And yeah, you just poke that through, where is it? Poke that through the side, and then you still have that little tag sticking out. And when it's attached onto an item as well, then you also have that to kind of undo the knot, just to make your life a little bit easier. You also have that section to pull it if you ever need to. So these little tags on small things that needs dexterity make your life that much easier. And when you're looking at bolt snaps, you'll see that these have a smooth trigger on them, which kind of makes sense, so you're less likely to open up that gate accidentally. However, in colder waters, you'll see these ones have like a proper shelf on that trigger, so that, yeah, it's much easier to grab hold of it, even with a chunky glove. So I tend to lean more towards this style if I'm diving in colder waters. It's just that much easier. So just kind of manipulate your dive equipment, and yeah, it just makes your life a little bit easier. Any other questions, by all means, pop them down in the comment section underneath this video. Remember to use this hashtag to get featured in an up and coming video. I'll try and type out a response in the meantime when I catch up with the comment section. But yeah, any other comments, questions, queries, or corrections, pop them down in the comment section underneath this video. Otherwise, remember to head over to our website, 𝐸𝐵𝐻𝑒𝐻.com, check out all our other like social media channels and things, and of course subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.